All right, class. I just want to address some final issues about the Dr. Faustus essays. Overall, there were some good results. I had some people that produced some really promising readings. I did have a few problems. The number one problem across the board, without conflict, is the topic sentences generally were not structured as claims, and they did not follow the semiotic method. The topic sentence is the first sentence of each body paragraph. It should follow the same semiotic structure that the thesis statement does. So that's signs in the case of the thesis statement, or sign in the case of the topic sentence, significance, so what, right? So the way that you think about it is the thesis is the big argument about everything you're going to be dealing with, and then you break it down in the topic sentences. Usually you focus on specific signs that either fit into a larger pattern or theme of signs, or a listing of signs that you give in the thesis. The topic sentence must follow the same formula. It's like a smaller thesis claim. It's more focused, okay? The other thing I saw is that a lot of you just sort of vaguely referenced the play. Some of you didn't use direct quotations. Always use direct quotations, especially in literature. The closer you work with the words on the page, the better, okay? You want to directly address what the playwright is saying. You want to have quotes, and you want to analyze those quotes in your own words. Always include analysis after quotes, and make sure you're analyzing the quotes directly and not generally. Don't let the quotes speak for themselves. As I always say, explain the bloody knife. Tell me why there is a bloody knife on the table, okay? Because there could be a number of different reasons, and I don't know until you explain it to me, okay? So those were the technical problems. Another problem I had is in the development of the so what. Many of you did not consider the context that we went over in class when you developed your so what for your thesis and topic sentences. The context that we talked about was about the Renaissance and the scientific revolution and the conflict that it was creating at the time and the tension that that caused. And many of you did incorporate that into your essay, but the overwhelming majority of students in the class wrote an essay saying that Christopher Marlowe had produced this play in order to reaffirm the Christian paradigm literally. And I can understand, based on what is in the play, why you would feel that way, because it's dealing with these themes, and it does seem to reinforce them literally. But I think when you consider the context of the moment, and also the context of Marlowe's life, he was very likely an atheist. He was arrested for blasphemy. This is not a person that would write a play trying to scare people into repentance. So what I'm suggesting is that it is possible that he is using these themes, which you and many others may have literal investment in, that he is using them, in my view, allegorically, representationally, as literary devices instead of literal things, right? And I think it was difficult for some of you to separate yourself from that, maybe partially because of your own views, maybe also because it just seemed so overt. The theme of temptation and damnation was so overtly stressed that it was hard to believe that he wasn't actually being serious about that. But I tend to view the play allegorically. I tend to view it as a representation of the struggle between science and religion that took place during, around, and after the Renaissance. And I think it's, I don't necessarily think that he believed in those things literally. Now, you may say that's a contradiction. How could he write such a play if he didn't actually believe those things? Because he was using them as devices. So in other words, there's a distinction between speaking about religious motifs as though they are real, which like you do in church or whatever, and speaking about religious motifs as though they are literary devices and could perhaps be used to allegorically represent some other meaning, right? The play is full of snark, it's full of mockery. He mocks religious figures, he mocks common ideas of the time. So it's hard for me to believe that he was really stressing the theme of repentance and redemption as something that he wanted everyone to take away. Possibly, I'm not saying that you're wrong. We can disagree. A professor can disagree with a student. Remember, I don't grade you necessarily on whether or not I disagree with you. I grade you on how you structure the essay and how you produce your argument, and whether or not you do the things that I tell you to do in class that would make for a good structured argument. So it's just something that I want you to consider. Try to separate yourself from these things where they arise, because even though you may be invested in them personally, it doesn't mean that the author is literally reinforcing them. Like, for example, if we were talking about J.R.R. Tolkien, and I were to say to you, J.R.R. Tolkien wrote The Lord of the Rings. Mordor is a place in Lord of the Rings. It's kind of like hell. It's like a nasty place with fire and brimstone. The orcs are there and all this stuff. If I said to you that Tolkien produced The Lord of the Rings, because Mordor is a real place and he doesn't want you to go there, and he wants us to be aware of the threat of it. You would think that I was being ridiculous because you don't have a literal investment in those ideas. You know, at least in the case of the context, that they were produced as fiction. So for me to suggest that they were real is kind of ridiculous, it would seem. Now, it doesn't mean that the belief in those things as literal places is ridiculous. It means just that when you are writing in terms of a literary essay, that you need to be able to separate yourself from your investment in those ideas as truths and your interpretation in those ideas as literary representations and devices and signs from which to derive meaning. So hopefully that makes sense. I don't mean to seem like a fuddy-duddy. You guys did a pretty good job overall. Just remember that the so what needs context. Context is usually historical context. For the final essay, you're doing Fight Club. Fight Club is much closer to the present moment. It's much closer to your own predicament than Dr. Faustus was. So the so what will have to do with how the work speaks to you and your situation and the society in which you live. So please consider that. Try to remember to get under the surface. Don't interpret these things necessarily literally or on a surface level. What we're trying to do is figure out how the author or the playwright or whoever, the poet, how they are commenting on society, or how they are offering a new view or a new take, or what is their actual meaning, what is their subliminal message, if you will, that we can access by way of analyzing the signs and interpreting them. That's all I got for you right now. Thanks for tuning in, and keep on rocking in the free world.